everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you are new. My name is Tonya, and today we're going to be chitty-chatting about all the books that I read in June. So I read 9 books total, 7 of which were physical or ebooks, and then 2 were audiobooks, and just a few little kind of stats for you, I guess. That equated to 3,531 pages read and 24 hours and 41 minutes of listening time for the audiobooks. I do tend to keep audiobooks and physical books or ebooks separate. They kind of live in 2 different universes for me. Think they both count as reading as far as you're listening or reading the book, but it's a different experience for me, so I don't generally count my audiobooks as pages read. So I don't do any sort of tandem audiobook and book reading together. They're completely separate entities, so that's kind of why I have it broken down that way. But June was a pretty good reading month for me. I read 7 books off of my TBR. Now for June and July, I did my TBR a little bit differently. I combined it, so there was 12 books total on it, and I've read 7 so far, so I have 5 more left to read in July. But I felt like 7 was a pretty good number, and then like I said, I had the 2 audiobooks on top of that. So go ahead, grab yourself a drink, sit back, and let's chat all the books I read in June. So let's first start with the 2 ebooks. So first up is Crown of Vengeance, and that is by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory. And I gave this one 4 stars. It is a reread for me, and I love anything written by Mercedes Lackey. And her and James Mallory this is the 3rd trilogy that they have in this particular world, and I've enjoyed all of them, but this particular series, it's been a long time in between books. So this one that I reread, Crown of Vengeance, that actually came out in 2012. The 2nd book in the series came out in 2017. And then in May, the 3rd book finally came out. So it's been a long wait in between the books. So I definitely was in need of a reread before I tried to read the 3rd one. So really enjoyed jumping back into this world. And just kind of a general overview, this is an epic fantasy. And I will say, if you're just coming into the series, I mean, you gotta let the names go. Like, they're almost impossible to pronounce. They're super long, like, 10, 12 characters long, and they're just a lot. So know that going in, that you're not gonna have an easy time with the names, and that's not necessarily super important. But just don't get stuck up on the pronunciations or anything like that, because the characters' names, as well as the names of the cities and everything else, they're just hard, and they're a lot. So you probably would end up reading this book a little slower than you may read other books, just because the names are such an undertaking. But I don't think that's a bad thing. It kind of gets you into the world and gets you absorbed in it a little bit better. But like I said, it's a great book. Just don't let yourself get caught up on the names. And then in these books, we're following Villasaria, and that is how I am pronouncing it. It probably isn't correct, and this is one of the easiest names in the book. So just a little perspective there. And she is an elven heir. Her parents were killed. Her house was wiped out during a war, and she has been fostered under another house while she's growing and coming to age. But basically, she is not well thought of because of who her parents were. And really, these other elven houses, they wanted to wipe out her house completely. But she was put under protection of Sanctuary, which is kind of the religious heart of the kingdom in this particular world. So she was put under protection, and she has been living with this other house. And she was not aware that she had come from a different house than the one that she's been living in. It comes to light what her background is and who her parents were. And once she finds out who she is, she ends up going and living at Sanctuary. And things just keep going and going from there. She wasn't aware that she had any magical powers. She comes to find out, along with her heritage, that she also does have magic, and that she's, maybe destined for a bigger purpose. She's the child of a prophecy, so there's just a whole lot of things going on, and it's a true epic fantasy. The world is great, and we're just following her as she, comes into her own, grows up, understands her powers, understands her part in this prophecy, and how she is going to help kind of fight back the Undarkened, who are just what the name implies, kind of an evil race that is looking to stamp out all the light in the world. So like I said, on this reread, I gave it 4 stars. I'm hoping to pick up the second book in the series in July or August. That way I can finally get to the conclusion of this amazing trilogy. But if you are an epic fantasy fan, this would be a great series for you. Now, if you're new to fantasy and you're just kind of looking to dip your toes into like an epic fantasy, this would not be the right trilogy for you, because it is super complex and very involved. But if you read a lot of epic fantasy, definitely check out this trilogy. Then the second ebook I read was The Age of the King, and that's by Philip Quintrell. And you all have heard me talk about the Echo Saga series for the past 6 months, because I've been reading one book in this series a month and absolutely love it. Now, this would be a good introductory fantasy series. I can't go into a lot of details about the plot in this particular one because it does build off the other ones. The first 3 books in the series kind of were in one time frame, and then we jumped forward like 30 years, and then the next 6 books are in this other time frame. So in the 6th book, we continued our fight that had been going on in between the Crow, who was the founder of the Black Hand, the Orcs, and then all of the other races in the world. That basically, the Orcs were living underground, and they've come back into the world, and they're pretty much trying to take out everyone who lives in the light. So anywhere the sun shines, they want those people to be wiped out, and they kind of want to take over and rule above ground and below ground. So this has been like an epic battle that has been going on for the last 2 books. It continued into this one. We got some more insights into our characters. I still love Asher. We got more of him in this book, which I was really happy about. And he's a ranger with a really complicated backstory. I don't want to go into it because it would ruin parts of the books. It definitely would be a spoiler. And besides Asher, there is just a lot of great characters in this book. The world building and the storytelling is amazing. Philip Quintrell does a really good job describing the battles as well, where they don't seem too monotone or too drawn out. You actually feel like you're part of the battle, which I think is hard for a lot of writers to do, but that's something I have really enjoyed about his writing. So this one was like at a 4.5 star for me, so really good book. And as I always say, if you haven't checked out the Echo Saga previously, you should definitely give it a try. If you're an epic fantasy fan, you won't be disappointed. And I'm going to try to finish up the last 3 books in the series sometime this year. I'm on track for that because I've been doing one a month, but I definitely want to get it finished because I know Philip Quintrell has some other series that I would like to get into as well. And now we're going to move on to the physical books I read. So now we're going to move on to the physical books that I read this month. And first up, we're going to talk about 4 Ruined Realms by Maya Corland. This is the 2nd book in the Broken Blades series. The first book was 5 Broken Blades. And for this book, I was at like 4.25, 4.0, somewhere in that range. I did give the first book in this series 5 stars. This one I enjoyed maybe a little bit less, but still super enjoyable. The world in this particular series is based loosely on like Korean folk tales. So it's not like a typical medieval kind of high fantasy, but there are still fantasy elements in it. The magic in it is more limited to like relic magic, seers, like things of that nature. So it's not your high fantasy magic with lots of spell work and that sort of thing. It's more of, like I said, more like the magic comes from relics and things of that nature, and can be somewhat more religious based. But what I really love about Maya Corlin's writing is the world building's really great. The storytelling also top notch, but the banter in between the characters and the way that she lets us see all of their different point of views and how quickly we go from perspective to perspective to perspective. I think that keeps these books really interesting and keeps them moving. Now we're still following those 5 main characters from the first book. We have our thief, our strongman, our exiled prince, our spy master, and our poison master. So we're still following that group of characters. I still love Ari as my favorite character in this series. She's just quirky and unique. She's the thief in the series. And she had a kind of big character arc in this book, lots of growth, but she still maintained that kind of youthful quirkiness, positive outlook on the world, which is part of what I really enjoy about her. And in this particular book, as I said, we're still following those 5 main characters, but their mission has kind of switched up. In the first book, they were all trying to kill the current God King, who just is basically a terrible person. But that was kind of the goal of that book. In this book, they're traveling to another realm, another kingdom per se, and they're trying to obtain a holy relic. It's a particular ring, and kind of lots of things ensue from there. There's lots of plot twists. Some of them are expected and you can figure out along the way. Some of them are completely unexpected. So just still a really good, solid second book in a series. I don't think it fell victim to second book syndrome in any way. Just it's still, like I said, even though I liked it a little less, still a really solid book. And I'm looking forward to continuing the series this month. The third book comes out on July 15th, and I've already pre-ordered it. So I'm really excited to continue the series once it finally gets here. Then next up, we're going to talk about Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This is a gothic romantasy and is part of the Wicked Games series. I ended up reading these out of order. This is the first book in the series. The second book is Enchantra, and I think it was April-ish when I read that one, maybe May, but I ended up reading them out of order. I had thought they were standalones, which they are to an extent, but if you read Enchantra first, there are some spoilers that you get from this book. Not enough where it didn't make this book enjoyable. I actually like this book way more than I did Enchantra, but just know going into it, if you do read them out of order, you will get some spoilers for this book. Now for Phantasma, it is a gothic romantasy, and it has kind of a unique twist on a necromancer. So Ophi, or Ophelia, is the main female character, and she is a necromancer, and she comes from a family of necromancers. But for her and her family, they have not chosen to go kind of the evil route that you traditionally see with necromancers. They more use their powers to help people and help people move on after someone's passing. So I thought that was a unique twist on kind of the traditional necromancer story. But basically, we're following Ophelia, and her mother suddenly passes away, and then her and her sister find that there was some debt that they maybe weren't aware of, and they're in danger of losing their family home. And so Ophelia is dealing with that and coming into her powers and her mother's death. And then her sister Genevieve ends up running off to try to take care of this debt problem by entering into a game or trials called Phantasma. And Phantasma is run by a devil, and there's all these different trials that you got to make it through, and it kind of goes through the different levels of hell for these trials. And while she's there, she doesn't get to be in contact with Genevieve. She doesn't 100% know if she's still alive or not, but she has to make it through all these trials, and they are pretty deadly trials. Some of them, I would say, I wouldn't call this super gruesome, but there are kind of some gruesome scenes in it. So just kind of know that going in. Like I said, it is a gothic romantasy, so a little on the darker side. There is spice in this book. The male main character is Blackwell, and he is some sort of a supernatural being. You find out more about him as the book goes along. But definitely if you like a little bit of a darker book, and you like that kind of gothic feel, I would give this series a try. For this one, I was at like a 4.25. I gave Enchantra a 4.0, but I think that it would not have earned that high of a mark if I had read this one first, because I just enjoyed this one so much more than I did Enchantra. Enchantra wasn't a bad book, but what I found with it is the beginning was really good, the end was really good, the middle was just okay. This one had a good pacing throughout. So if, like I said, if you do like a little bit of a darker romantasy or that gothic feel, then I think you'll enjoy this book. And looking at my remaining pile here, I am coming to realize I seem to have read some more on the darker side of books for June. I'm not really sure why that is. That's not my typical reads, but I think that's just kind of how this month played out. So continuing on with that kind of darker theme, the next book I read was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and this is a YA series. Even though it's YA, it still does have some darker elements in it, but nothing too over the top. And when I went into this book, I thought it was a YA romantasy. It is not a romantasy. There's a very small subplot of romance, at least in this first book. Like, the romance portion is like, I wouldn't even say a tenth of the book. It's a very low amount of romance, but you can kind of see where it may build in the future books. And what I really enjoyed in this book was the representation of the Fae as being wicked, which that's more of a like traditional view on how Fae are. Even in a lot of books currently, you'll find that they're aloof or look down on humans, things of that nature, but they're not necessarily truly wicked, which in this series they 100% are wicked Fae. Which I really enjoyed. Like I said, it's not an outlook you get very often anymore, I would say, when the Fae are referred to in stories. Holly Black just does a really good job with her description of the Fae in this book as well. They're not all your classically beautiful. Some of them have different skin tones. Some of them have animal parts, just different things. So they're beautiful, but not beautiful in like a standard way. And I think her descriptions of the Fae are one of my favorite parts of this particular book. And I was at about a 3.75 stars for this book. Still very enjoyable. It was a little bit, just in parts of it, young. I'm sure that's because it was YA, but I thought parts of it were just a little young, a little repetitive. And in this book, we're following Jude and her twin sister and her older sister, who were brought under hill after the murder of her parents. And that's not a spoiler, that happens at the beginning of the book. But she's taken under hill. The Fae, as I said, are pretty wicked in this book. So they're not very nice to humans, and she's looked down upon. Something that's a little different in kind of the storytelling is she's being raised by the person who killed her parents, which you can imagine kind of does things to someone's mind, just having that kind of constant fear in the back of your head. Plus, they do grow to care for each other, but I think it's always in the back of her and her sister's head that their adoptive father killed her parents. So he is, their adoptive father is a general Underhill, and he's been raising them as part of their aristocracy. So they're doing classes and interacting with, the other royal fays, which is not typical. Most humans who are in this particular world are servants or used for other things, like sexual slaves or things of that nature, but they're looked down upon, they're thought to be weak and dumb, and they're just really taken advantage of. And so with Jude and her sister taking classes with these, upper class fays, they're just getting it rubbed in their face constantly that they are human and just not as good as everyone else. Now we do find, and I can see how this happened based on her upbringing and backstory. Jude is a very morally gray character, and you will see that kind of play out throughout the book. And one of the people that Jude and her sister have been taking classes with is Prince Carden, who is the youngest prince of the current king of the realm. And he in particular really gives Jude and her sister a hard time, and definitely is not the nicest to them, and goes out of his way to kind of bring them down and make them uncomfortable. But this book is very political in nature. So there is a lot of like succession talk and, power plays between the different royals that take place in this book. And as the story progresses, Jude ends up kind of being able to get herself in what is going to be a position of power, and has some influence on how the succession is going to turn out. Carden plays a role in this, but it's not necessarily the role you would expect. I would say the ending of this book is predictable, but how we got to the ending is not predictable, and that's what I really liked about it. So I'm interested to see how Jude and Carden's relationship changes in the second book. Like I said, this one had very little romance, but there was little hints at what could happen, and I'm kind of interested to see, just based on this wicked nature of Carden and the Fae in general, how a romance would even remotely come to evolve. So we'll see. I plan on picking up the next book soon, and this was just a good little quick read. Then continuing our little dark, wicked theme that we seem to have had in June, which, like I said, very odd for summer reading, but it's how it turned out, is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Menscalaco. I'm pretty sure I butchered her last name, but we're going to move on. We know that pronunciation isn't necessarily my strong point, but this is a YA series, and what I will say is the first book, there were parts of it kind of like, I would say, The Cruel Prince, where parts of it felt a little young, but I have heard this series grows in maturity as we kind of go through the series. Now, that being said, I've heard that there's a lot of, or a decent amount of spice in the coming books. There wasn't a ton in this particular book, but just something to be aware of. I did hear that the series gets spicier as it goes along. And this book is set in our world, but it's kind of in a more, in an elder, what am I trying to say? In a past time. So like as far as technology, I mean, people are still using lanterns, things of that nature. So it is like an old world. That's what I was looking for. I couldn't find the words, but it has a more old world kind of setting. It is set in Italy, and we're following Amelia, and she has a twin sister named Vittoria, and they are witches. And it's more, the witches in this book are more of that old world feel, where, you know, some of the spells they do are with herbs and things of that nature. Some of it's, you know, drawing with blush chalk. Some of it is blood magic. So there's kind of a big mix, but it's more that old world kind of magic that I think we're all, you know, kind of familiar with. And witches are in hiding. There has been witch hunters that have killed quite a few witches for, you know, quote unquote being wicked or evil or bad, when some of them were, some of them weren't. There's good witches and kind of dark witches. Dark witches do more of the blood magic, where good witches are using more of, you know, the chalk or herbs or flowers, things of that nature. So I really did like how the witchcraft was kind of represented in this book, and really enjoyed that kind of old world feel to it. The princes of hell also play a major part in the plot of this book. So that's kind of where some of that wickedness is coming in, you know, bargains with the devil, things of that nature. But basically, we're following Amelia and Vittoria. Vittoria ends up getting murdered, and Amelia ends up going on a journey to find out who killed her sister and looking for revenge for her death. Now, Amelia is more of a good witch, but as she goes on this quest for vengeance, you know, she does take some turns towards that more darker side. Wrath, one of the princes of hells, plays a big part in this book, and I really enjoyed him as a character. But basically, the plot of the book is Amelia trying to figure out who killed her sister, why she was killed, and why she was doing the kind of things she was before she was murdered. Because it looked like she'd made a deal with the devil, as one does, and Amelia had no idea that her sister was involved in any sort of summoning of devils or dark magic or anything of that nature. So she's trying to just figure out what was going on and what her sister had gotten herself wrapped up in that led to her death. So for this one, I was at like a 3.75 to 4.0, which is where I end up with a lot of YA books, because there's just parts of them that are a little young for me, but I still find them enjoyable overall. So that's why I continue to read YA books, but there just tends to be that tendency for parts of the book to feel a little bit young, which usually affects my rating of it, but enjoyed it. It of course ended on a cliffhanger, but I plan to continue on with the series. There's 2 more books, so we'll see where it goes from there. Alright, so the final physical book that I read was Silver Elite by Danny Francis, and this is a dystopian romantasy and was a solid 4-star read for me. Now, I would say the romance, it plays a good part of the plot, but there's definitely more of a military feel to the book than necessarily a romance feel. Now, I believe this is the start of a series, so I'm sure we will see that progress throughout the books as far as the romance plot. For this particular book, I would say the romance was a bigger subplot, but not the main plot of the book. So in this book, we're following Ren, who has been raised by her uncle. He wasn't really her uncle, but that is what she called him, after her parents were killed. And she has mind magic, and she's something called a mod, which in this particular world is not something that you want to be. Basically, the mods were previously in power, but there was a bad one of them who misused his mind magic and tried to control people, take away their free will, you know, just all the bad things. So the mods were overthrown, which did not really result in a better leader. It's just a different kind of dictator, basically. But now, with the general that is currently in charge, he has these mods being hunted down, imprisoned, killed. It's something they have to stay in hiding if they want to survive. And Ren's mind magic is particularly strong. So it's kind of been more of a struggle for her to stay hidden than it may have been, maybe for some people with lesser abilities. But she's been living with this uncle, and she does something that ends up basically she's forced to go into training with their military and become part of their elite force, all while trying to hide these mind powers that she has so that she doesn't get killed. So I really like the way the mind magic was presented in this book. The author made it really easy to follow kind of the dialogue that was going on. Standard dialogue was kind of in one font. Internal dialogue was italicized. And then if the mind magic kind of telepathy talking back and forth between people was being used, that was in a third font. So it made it really easy to read and kind of keep track of what was going on with the different types of conversation that could happen. Now, I will say there was kind of one of the big reveals at the end of the book. I figured that out within the first 75 pages. So parts of this I think were predictable. Now, whether the author wanted you to kind of get that feel early on, I don't know. So that was kind of one I thought could have been, the hints for that could have been more subtle, so that it was a bigger surprise at the end. But overall, really like the book. Will continue if there's another one that comes out. Like I said, solid 4 stars. If you like kind of a dystopian military kind of book, then I think you would like this. If you're looking for more of a hardcore fantasy, then this probably wouldn't be for you. So now let's move on to the 2 audiobooks that I finished this month. The first one was Birth of a Dynasty by Chinaza Bado, and I did look up how to pronounce that one, so hopefully I did that right, because I know when I mentioned it in a reading blog, I absolutely butchered it. So wanted to put a little more effort into the pronunciation this time. So this book is centered around kind of African, West African culture, and it is going to be a trilogy. And I will say, the world building in this book was great. It was definitely more of a political book, same as with kind of the feel of the 5 Broken Blades for Rhone Realms books. The magic in this book is more seer's magic or ancestral kind of magic. And as I said, it's definitely more on the political side. We're following 3 families, but more in this book, our main focus is on 2 of those families, particularly the children from those families. One of those being Mukuru, who is a young boy who sees his family brutally murdered at the beginning of the book, which right off the bat, there's parts of this book where I definitely teared up. And just, it was just tragic and sad. And anytime a child has to go through something like that, it makes it even worse. But the story was just told really well. And then we are also following Zakura, who was a young girl who was basically forced to go live at the palace so that she can be used to kind of keep her father in line by the current king. And these 2 children, who are living very different lives at this point, just go through so much, and the storytelling, like I said, is really good. The things these children have to go through, that part was definitely a little rough for me, but because anytime children and animals are involved, I can be a hot mess if anything happens to them. But we really see them go through a lot of things, kind of grow and come into their own. And for Mukuru, he's kind of on a journey for vengeance for his family being killed. And for Zakura, at least at the beginning, hers is maybe a little bit about vengeance, but it's more about doing what she can to keep her family safe and keep her homeland safe, because she realizes she is this political pawn that the king is using to keep her family in check. And then as the story goes on, more of the kind of revenge aspect comes back into the picture for her as well. So really good book. The narrator did a good job. It did take me a minute to get used to the accent of the narrator, but that just added another layer to the storytelling. So did really enjoy it. If you do like kind of a political kind of a feel to a book, then I would suggest this one. And like I said, the audiobook was great. So listening to it, I think listening to it may be a little easier than reading the actual book, just because you do get kind of that additional layer of storytelling to make you kind of really feel for the characters from the narrator, where some of that may be lost if you're just reading the physical book. And if I didn't say, I was at 4-star for this particular book, so would highly recommend picking it up. And then for my final book that I listened to, that was This Vicious Dream by Stasia Stark. And this one was 4.25 stars for me. I really, really enjoyed it. If you haven't read The Kingdom of Lies by Stasia Stark, I would suggest you read that series before listening to or reading The Vicious Dream, just because we are following Medinia, who was one of my favorite characters from the Kingdom of Lies series, but we're following Medinia and Calician, who we also met in the Kingdom of Lies series, and I just feel like that backstory of Medinia's is really important to becoming invested in her and the plot that is going on in The Vicious Dreams. But Medinia is one of my favorites. She is snarky and she is tough. And, you know, she doesn't take crap from anyone, but there's still kind of a hidden, softer side to her. So she is like one of my favorite characters. So I was really happy to get a continuation of her story and have the focus be more on her and then the love interest, Calician, who only played a small part in the previous books. But we always knew from that Kingdom of Lies series that they were going to be fated to meet again and that there would be romance involved. But when the book starts out, Medinia is actually a prisoner currently, and the take on her imprisonment and the storytelling of it, I thought was really unique and just really, really good storytelling. And then she does eventually get released, and she begins traveling with Calician to continue to try to keep the grimoires of the Dark God that we learned about in the Kingdom of Lies series, to continue to keep those hidden, keep those safe, so that the world doesn't kind of go back into war and ruin. So Medinia and Calician have really great chemistry, and the banter in the book is also really good. If you like sarcasm and that little bit of snark, then you will like them as a couple. But basically, as they go on this journey to keep these grimoires out of the wrong hands, it kind of starts to evolve, and we learn more about Calician's backstory and what these grimoires might actually mean to him. So I really enjoyed this book, but it did of course end on a cliffhanger, so we won't really know what happens until we get into the next book. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. I haven't seen anything about when the second book in the series is going to come out, but I will definitely be continuing on with the series because, as I said, Medinia is one of my favorite female characters, and I just kind of want to see how this whole thing in between her and Calician and the hunt for the grimoires plays out. And that is it. That is everything I read in the month of June. Like I said, for whatever reason, some of the books were a little more on the darker side, which Not typical for summer, but you know, that's just kind of how the reading vibes fell this month. What was your favorite book that you read this month? And have you read any of the books that I read? And what did you think about them? Definitely leave me a comment down below. I always love hearing from you guys and kind of interacting and talking books. So would love to know what your favorite book was that you read this month. Take care, keep reading, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.